The first light of dawn filtered through the curtains as Margaret awoke to the familiar melody of the alarm. She stretched, feeling a sense of contentment, still cocooned in the belief that she led a blessed life with her loving husband and 2 beautiful daughters. She silenced the alarm with a gentle tap and rolled out of bed, her feet touching the cool floor. Humming softly, she donned her robe and padded into the kitchen to start the coffee machine. Its comforting gurgle filled the quiet morning as she set about preparing breakfast. Margaret believed in the simple joys of life, a well-made coffee, the laughter of her children, a husband who seemingly had nothing to hide, often leaving his phone unattended on the kitchen counter or the living room couch, screen lit up with mundane notifications. "Good morning, world," she whispered to herself, slicing bread for toast, the sharp scent of citrus filling the air as she also peeled oranges for Rosa and cut apples for Lisa. Today, she felt particularly grateful as she spread peanut butter and jam over the bread, crafting each sandwich with love. As the children came bounding down the stairs, their cheerful greetings lifted her spirits even higher. "Good morning, Mum. Is Dad awake?" Lisa asked, her voice filled with excitement for the day. "He's just getting up, love," Margaret replied, placing a kiss on her forehead. Tom appeared moments later, his hair still tousled from sleep. He smiled at Margaret, a warm, familiar gesture that spoke of years of shared love. "Morning, beautiful," Tom greeted her, wrapping an arm around her waist as he pecked her cheek. Margaret's heart fluttered at the affection. Everything seemed so perfect, so right. After breakfast, the morning unfolded with the usual rush. Lunches packed, quick hugs exchanged, and promises to catch up at dinner. Tom mentioned he had a few urgent meetings, but would try to make it home early. Margaret watched him leave, her heart full of love and trust. However, the serene morning took a sharp turn when Margaret decided to tidy up Tom's home office while the girls were at school. As she dusted his desk, her hand brushed against a drawer slightly ajar. Curious, she pulled it open, expecting to find just bills and old receipts. Instead, her fingers met the cold surface of a second phone, one she had never seen before, tucked beneath some papers. Her pulse quickened, her hands trembling as she picked up the device. It was identical to Tom's regular phone, but why would he need 2? With a sense of dread tightening in her chest, she powered it on. The lock screen greeted her, an unfamiliar code shielding its secrets. Margaret felt a chill run down her spine. The open, transparent life she thought she shared with Tom suddenly seemed a facade. She remembered how he'd been protective of his office lately, always ensuring it was locked, which had seemed unnecessary until now. Confusion and fear mingled with her rising panic. Had she been naive all these years? She needed answers, but was terrified of what she might find. With a heavy heart, she replaced the phone exactly how she found it, her mind racing with suspicion and the sting of potential betrayal. For the rest of the day, Margaret moved through her chores mechanically, her thoughts clouded with doubt. She kept glancing towards the office, the image of the hidden phone burning in her mind. By the time the girls came home, her smile was forced, her interactions distracted. As the reality of the situation sunk in, Margaret realised she needed to confront Tom, to uncover the truth about the second phone and what it concealed. But part of her feared what that truth might be, how it could shatter the idyllic life she thought they had built together. With her mind clouded by the revelation of the second phone, Margaret managed to maintain a semblance of normalcy as she prepared dinner. The cheerful chatter of Lisa and Rosa at the table did little to ease the growing storm within her. Her smiles were hollow, her laughter forced. When the girls had been tucked into bed, Margaret sat alone in the living room, the silence oppressive. She stared at the phone in her hand, her own, not the secret one hidden away in Tom's office. The temptation to confront him over text was overwhelming, but she knew this was a conversation that needed to be had face to face. Each minute ticked by like an hour as she waited for him. Finally, the sound of the front door opening broke the tense silence. Tom called out a weary, "I'm home," but there was no warmth in his voice. As he entered the living room and saw Margaret waiting, his smile faltered. "Hey, everything okay?" he asked, setting his keys on the table. Margaret took a deep breath, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. "We need to talk, Tom." He frowned, a hint of apprehension crossing his features. "Sure, what's up?" "It's about your office, and a phone I found there," Margaret began, her voice steady despite the turmoil inside. Tom's expression changed instantly, his casual demeanour replaced by defensiveness. "What phone?" Margaret's heart ached at his feigned ignorance. "A second phone, Tom, hidden in your desk drawer." Seeing that there was no way out, Tom sighed heavily, his shoulders slumping. "Margaret, I can explain." "Please do," she interrupted, her tone firm yet pleading for the truth. Tom paused, searching for words. "It's not what you think. It's just a phone I use for work. Some contacts are... It's complicated." Margaret's eyes filled with tears, not convinced by his explanation. "Why would you need to hide a work phone from me, Tom? From your family?" He rubbed his forehead, looking exhausted. "It's not about hiding. It's about keeping my work life separate. I didn't want to worry you." "But why lock it away? Why the secrecy?" Her voice cracked, the pain evident. Tom looked away, unable to meet her gaze. "I made a mistake, Margaret. I should have told you. I'm sorry." The room fell silent, the air thick with unspoken words and mounting doubts. Margaret needed to know everything, to understand the full extent of Tom's deception. "Is there something going on with someone from work?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. Tom hesitated, then shook his head. "No, nothing like that. It's just stressful, and I didn't want to burden you." Margaret studied his face, searching for any sign of dishonesty. "I need to see the messages, Tom. Please." Reluctantly, Tom retrieved the second phone and unlocked it. The screen lit up, revealing numerous messages from various contacts, none of which seemed overly personal at first glance. Yet, the trust had been broken, and every mundane message now seemed suspect. Margaret scrolled through the texts, her heart sinking further with each one. While nothing explicitly inappropriate emerged, the secrecy itself was a betrayal. She handed the phone back to Tom, her decision clear. "I need some time, Tom. Time to think about us, about what this family means to you." Tom nodded, his face pale. "I understand. I'll do whatever it takes to fix this, Margaret. I love you and the girls more than anything." As Tom retreated to the guest room for the night, Margaret remained in the living room, the weight of her wedding ring heavy on her finger. She knew the coming days would be filled with difficult decisions, but for the sake of her daughters and her own peace of mind, she was determined to uncover the whole truth, no matter how painful it might be. In the days that followed, Margaret grappled with her doubts and the tenuous thread of trust that still connected her to Tom. Despite his assurances, the shadows of secrecy lingered. She decided to give him the benefit of the doubt, attributing the second phone to the pressures of his demanding job. Yet, the seed of suspicion had been planted deep, and it drove her to keep a watchful eye on his actions. One afternoon, while Tom was at work, Margaret found herself in his home office again. This time, it was to retrieve a document he had asked her to scan and send for an urgent work matter. As she searched through the piles of papers and files, she stumbled upon a receipt tucked in the back of a drawer. 2 coffees at a quaint cafe not far from Tom's office, dated several times over the past few months. Curiosity piqued, Margaret decided to visit the cafe during the time marked on one of the receipts. She settled at a nearby table with a book, her eyes scanning the room. Soon Tom walked in, his presence commanding as always. However, he wasn't alone. Pearl, his boss's daughter, accompanied him, her laughter ringing clear across the room as they chose a secluded spot. Margaret watched, heart sinking, as Tom and Pearl conversed with an ease that spoke of familiarity and intimacy. Their casual touches, the way they leaned into each other, these were not the interactions of mere colleagues. As they left together, laughing and comfortable in each other's company, Margaret felt the sting of betrayal sharper than ever. Returning home, she was a maelstrom of emotion. Yet she resolved to keep her discovery to herself. Revealing her knowledge would only cause a confrontation she was not yet ready to face. Instead, she began to document Tom's indiscretions discreetly, gathering evidence and tracing the timeline of his deceit. Weeks passed, and with each day Margaret's resolve grew stronger. She watched Tom, noting his late nights and the frequent texts that pulled him away from family dinners. Her heart hardened with the realization that the man she had loved was a stranger now. Yet a flicker of desperation remained, some foolish hope that she could salvage what was left of her marriage. If there was even a sliver of a chance to restore their family, she owed it to the girls, to herself, to try. Margaret's resolve to save her family led her to confront Pearl before taking any drastic measures. She decided to meet Pearl face to face, hoping perhaps to appeal to her better nature, or at least understand the depth of the relationship she had stumbled upon. One afternoon she waited outside the cafe where she had first witnessed the intimacy between Tom and Pearl. As Pearl approached, Margaret stepped forward, blocking her path with a calm but determined demeanour. "Pearl, may I have a word with you?" Margaret's voice was steady, though her heart raced with anticipation and fear. Pearl paused, her expression one of mild annoyance turning into guarded curiosity. "Margaret Wright, Tom's wife? What can I do for you?" "We need to talk about Tom," Margaret began, her voice firm. "I believe you know why." Pearl's eyes narrowed slightly, a defensive edge creeping into her voice. "I'm not sure what you want me to say." "It's about what's happening between you and my husband. I'm asking you to consider what this is doing to my family," Margaret implored, trying to keep the tremor from her voice. Pearl's demeanour shifted from defensive to dismissive, her voice cold and distant. "Tom has already made his choice, Margaret. He's with me because he wants to be, not because he's trapped. You should just accept it and move on." Margaret felt a sting at Pearl's blunt words, a mix of pain and anger boiling inside her. "You're tearing a family apart. My daughters." Her voice trailed off, choked by emotion. "Tom loves me, Margaret, not you. It's best if you leave us alone," Pearl stated firmly, her tone final, leaving no room for further discussion. Stunned by the callous dismissal, Margaret watched as Pearl turned and walked away, leaving her standing alone, grappling with the raw, painful reality that her efforts to mend her family might be futile. The confrontation had not gone as she had hoped, and it crushed the last hope she harboured of salvaging her marriage through understanding and compromise. Driving home, Margaret's mind raced. The pain of Pearl's words cut deep, but they also ignited a determination within her. If reason and emotional pleas wouldn't work, she needed a different approach to protect what was left of her family's dignity and future. With a newfound resolve, she formulated a plan. She knew she needed evidence, something undeniable that Tom couldn't twist or explain away. Driving to the hotel, Margaret felt a mix of fear and determination. She parked across the street, her hands trembling as she waited. Soon Tom's car appeared, and Pearl was with him. They entered the hotel with a familiarity that confirmed Margaret's worst fears. Swallowing her rising nausea, she took a deep breath and reached for her phone. She wouldn't crumble beneath their betrayal. She would use this as ammunition for the fight ahead. Sitting alone in her car, Margaret allowed herself a few moments of grief, tears streaming down her face as the final pieces fell into place. But the time for tears was brief. Wiping her face, she composed herself and dialed a number she had come to know well over the past few weeks, the number of Tom's boss, Mr. Dickens. "Mr. Dickens, this is Margaret," she began, her voice steady despite the storm raging within her. "There's something important we need to discuss about Tom and Pearl." Mr. Dickens responded to Margaret's call with a mix of shock and urgency, his voice tight with restrained anger. "Margaret, I'll meet you there. Stay put and don't do anything," he instructed firmly. Within minutes, Mr. Dickens arrived at the hotel, his face set in grim lines of betrayal and disappointment. Margaret met him in the lobby, her evidence in hand, photos and messages she had discreetly gathered over the past weeks. Together, they approached the hotel room where Tom and Pearl had disappeared. Without hesitation, Mr. Dickens knocked sharply on the door, his presence commanding and intimidating. The door swung open to reveal Tom and Pearl, their expressions turning from surprise to horror as they recognized their visitors. "Dad, what are you—" Pearl began, but Mr. Dickens cut her off with a cold fury that Margaret had never seen in him. "Save it, Pearl. I've seen enough," he said, his voice low and dangerous. He turned his gaze to Tom, who had paled significantly. "And you. I trusted you, Tom. You're fired. Pack your things and leave the office today." The room fell silent, the weight of his words hanging heavy. Pearl looked between her father and Tom, tears starting to form in her eyes, but Mr. Dickens was unyielding. "Come with me, Pearl. We're going home, and you're not to see him again," he commanded, grabbing his daughter's arm and pulling her away. Tom stood frozen, his eyes meeting Margaret's for a fleeting moment, filled with pleading and despair. But Margaret's gaze was resolute, her decision firm. As Mr. Dickens and Pearl left the room, Margaret lingered a moment longer. "I hope you find what you're looking for, Tom," she said, not unkindly, but with a finality that marked the end of their chapter together. Returning home, the quiet of the house enveloped Margaret. She moved through the rooms slowly, processing the events that had unfolded so rapidly. It was over. She felt a mixture of relief and sorrow, a sense of closure mingling with the raw edges of new beginnings. Later that evening, Tom came to the house. His face was haggard, his eyes red as if he had been crying. He looked broken, a stark contrast to the composed man she had known. "Margaret, please," he started, his voice cracking. "I'm so sorry. I made a huge mistake. I want to make things right. I want to be here, with you and the girls." Margaret listened quietly, her expression unreadable. She had prepared for this moment, and while part of her ached to see him so shattered, she knew her decision was the right one. "Tom, it's too late. I can't just forget what happened, and I can't trust you not to hurt us again. The girls and we need to move on," she said, her voice steady despite the turmoil inside. Tom nodded slowly, the reality of her words settling in. He looked around the house one last time, the place he had called home, now just a shell of memories. "I'll always regret this," he whispered before turning to leave, his shoulders slumped in defeat. With Tom gone, Margaret felt the final thread of their connection sever. A wave of exhaustion washed over her, but alongside it, a strange sense of relief. She wouldn't crumble, not again. She turned to face her new life, one that she would build on her own terms. Margaret lay awake long into the night, planning and dreaming. The path ahead wouldn't be easy, but it would be hers. She envisioned a future where her girls wouldn't need to walk on eggshells, where laughter filled the house again. She was free now, free to offer her daughters a life filled with love, security and honesty, a life far better than the one Tom could offer. As Margaret embarked on her new life, the search for stability became her top priority. Drawing on her experience and qualifications as a lawyer, she secured a position at a small, up-and-coming legal firm that promised not just a fresh start, but also potential growth. It was the perfect opportunity to rebuild her professional life while providing for her daughters, who were her world. At the firm, Margaret quickly established herself as a diligent and capable attorney, her expertise in family law proving invaluable. Her days were busy, filled with client meetings, case research, and court appearances, which suited her fine. They kept her mind off the personal turmoil of the past months. Then, at a local legal conference organised to discuss recent developments in family law, Margaret met Daniel Archer. He was a consultant specialising in mediation, known for his innovative approaches and charismatic presentations. Daniel noticed Margaret immediately. There was a quiet strength about her, an elegance in her focus that drew him in. After his talk, Daniel made it a point to introduce himself during the coffee break. "Margaret, I was hoping to run into you here. I've heard about your work and I must say it's impressive." Daniel started, extending a hand with a friendly smile. "Thank you, Daniel. I enjoyed your presentation. It's a fresh perspective on mediation," Margaret replied, her manner polite yet reserved. Over the next few weeks, they bumped into each other at various professional events. Daniel always made a point to talk to Margaret, and each conversation seemed to linger longer than the last. Despite the professional setting, there was an undeniable chemistry between them. However, Margaret was cautious. Her recent divorce had left her wary of new relationships, and her primary focus was her daughter's well-being. She knew she wasn't ready to dive into anything serious. Sensing her hesitation, Daniel proposed a casual coffee meeting, just as colleagues. Margaret agreed, seeing no harm in a friendly discussion outside the office. Their coffee meet turned into a series of casual encounters. Daniel was considerate and understanding, never pushing beyond the boundaries Margaret set. Yet his interest was clear, and it didn't wane with her hesitations. Then, one rainy afternoon, everything changed. Margaret was at the park with her daughters when the youngest, Rosa, slipped on the wet grass and twisted her ankle. It was nothing serious, but she was in pain and the skies were opening up with heavy rain. Just then, Daniel happened to be passing by. He saw them, hurried over with his umbrella, and offered his help. He gently helped Rosa to her feet and offered to drive them home. Margaret was touched by his kindness and the way he cared for Rosa, making her laugh despite the pain. That evening, as Daniel helped them inside and made sure Rosa was comfortable on the couch, Margaret saw a side of him that went beyond what she had allowed herself to notice before. "Thank you, Daniel. I don't know what I would have done if you hadn't been there," Margaret said, as he was about to leave. "It's no problem at all. I'm just glad I could help," Daniel replied, smiling. "Maybe I could come by another day, check on Rosa, and maybe bring some dinner. Only if that's okay with you," he added, hoping not to overstep. Margaret hesitated, aware of how much she actually wanted him to come back. "That would be nice, Daniel. Thank you." From that day, their relationship took a natural step forward. Daniel became a regular visitor, not just as a friend, but slowly, as something more. Margaret found herself opening up, letting go of past fears, and considering the possibility of a new future. Daniel was patient, never rushing her, always mindful of her needs and those of her daughters. As the weeks turned into months, Margaret's life found a new rhythm and joy she hadn't known was possible. Her relationship with Daniel deepened, grounded in shared laughter, mutual respect, and an understanding that was both comforting and exhilarating. Her daughters, Lisa and Rosa, thrived in the stability and love that Daniel brought into their lives, his presence becoming a natural and cherished part of their routine. One sunny Saturday afternoon, Margaret, her daughters, and Daniel decided to celebrate the warm weather with dinner at a popular outdoor restaurant, known for its vibrant atmosphere and delicious food. They chose a table under the colourful string lights, their laughter mingling with the lively chatter around them. As they shared stories and enjoyed their meal, Margaret felt a contentment she hadn't experienced in years. Daniel was recounting a humorous incident from work, animatedly gesturing, causing Lisa and Rosa to giggle uncontrollably. It was then that Margaret noticed Tom approaching their table. His steps were hesitant, and his expression was a mix of nostalgia and regret. Margaret's heart skipped a beat, the past momentarily casting a shadow over the table. Daniel noticed the change in her demeanour and followed her gaze. "Margaret, is everything okay?" Daniel asked quietly, placing a reassuring hand over hers. "Yes, it's just Tom," she replied, taking a deep breath. Tom's presence was hesitant, and his eyes flickered with a mix of emotions as he neared. Lisa and Rosa spotted him too, their reactions a blend of surprise and cautious welcome. Tom managed a small smile as he reached them, bending down to gently kiss each of his daughters on the forehead, an old gesture of affection that felt both familiar and distant. "Hey girls," Tom said softly, his voice tinged with regret. "You both look wonderful." Lisa and Rosa responded politely, their manners impeccable as always, though they remained slightly reserved. Daniel, sensing the delicate nature of the situation, gave Margaret a supportive look, silently communicating his readiness to step back if needed. Tom then turned to Margaret, his expression earnest. "Margaret, could we talk? Just for a moment, alone." Margaret nodded, excusing herself from the table with a reassuring smile at Daniel and her daughters. She led Tom a few steps away from the table, ensuring they were out of earshot but still in sight, her heart steadying itself for whatever Tom might say. "I won't take much of your time," Tom began, his hands clasped nervously in front of him. Seeing you here, with the girls and Daniel, laughing and happy, it's a lot to process. I never realised how much I lost until now." Margaret listened quietly, the cool evening breeze playing with strands of her hair, providing a momentary distraction from the weight of his words. "I regret so many things, Margaret," Tom continued, his voice cracking slightly. "The choices I made, the pain I caused you and the girls. I'm truly sorry. I hope one day you can forgive me." Margaret took a deep breath, the past and present colliding in her heart. "Thank you, Tom. That means a lot to hear. Forgiveness isn't simple, but I appreciate your apology." Tom nodded, a sense of relief briefly crossing his features. "I just want you all to be happy. That's all I've ever wanted, even if I lost sight of that along the way." "Thank you, Tom," Margaret repeated, her tone kind yet distant, a boundary firmly set. "We should get back." As they returned to the table, Daniel gave Margaret an understanding glance, his presence a silent pillar of strength. She smiled at him, then at her daughters, reassured by their resilience and the new life they were building together. Tom briefly waved goodbye to the family, a final acknowledgement of the scene he once belonged to, but no longer did. As he walked away, Margaret felt a chapter close, one filled with lessons and hardships, but also growth. The rest of the evening passed with renewed joy. Daniel's stories brought back the laughter, and the warmth of the family unit shone brightly. As they left the restaurant, Margaret felt a profound peace settle within her. She was moving forward, not just surviving but thriving, surrounded by love that was chosen, not obligated. That night was a reaffirmation for Margaret. She was on the right path, one paved with hope, love, and the promise of new beginnings, no longer shadowed by regrets, but illuminated by the possibilities of tomorrow. We all deserve honesty and respect in our relationships. Has something like this ever happened to you? How did you overcome it? Let's build a community of support and empowerment in the comments. And if you like stories of strength and fresh starts, show some love by subscribing, hitting that like button, and sharing this video.